Okay, I'd like to call a meeting to order for the Lander County Land Division Committee for May 14th, 2024. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest from the members? I have none. Okay, and none for the members. I have a motion that's moved by Stephen Lewis and second by Doug James that the minutes of the Land Division Committee meeting held on April 9th, 2024 be approved as circulated. Any discussion on those minutes or of the motion? Okay, and the motion's approved. Thank you. And I have a second motion that's moved by Doug James and second by Stephen Lewis that the agenda be adopted as presented. Any additions or deletions to the agenda? Madam Secretary, any changes? No?
No, there's not.
And are you in favor of this, Doug?
I'm in favor.
Yeah. Okay, so that's carried as well. Okay, we may as well move on to our first application. You want to
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first application today is for 3 new lots, B23/141, 142, and 143. And these are for 3 new lots in Drummond North Elmsley Township off of Rathwell Road. Each lot will be 1.0 hectares in area, and the frontage and access will be on what's currently the unopened road allowance. That's south of the properties, and the township has already reviewed the unopened road allowance situation and has agreed that the road can be constructed over that road allowance, and it'll be assumed by the township so it can meet the frontage requirements under the zoning bylaw. This application, there had been some concerns raised when Rideau Valley did its initial review, and they pointed out some potential wetland flooding concerns with respect to natural hazards. They did make some recommendations in terms of building envelopes, so we've incorporated that into the development agreement condition. There were some public concerns that were raised relating to the boundaries of the property and the road allowance. We did not receive any follow-up title information or survey information, so we don't know exactly what those concerns are related to what's on the ground. But as you know, the survey will be required as the applicant needs to create the lots and create the road. So any sort of boundary issues or disputes with respect to that will presumably be shown by the draft survey. So we are recommending that the Land Division Committee grant provisional consent for these 3 new lots, subject to the conditions outlined in the planning report.
Thank you, Cindy. And by the notes you provided me, we have one of the owners here. Do you wish to make a presentation? Okay, just a couple of reminders when we get started. You'll need to use the microphones when you go to make a presentation because we are being live streamed, and state your name clearly so we can get that into the minutes. And I'm going to swear you in if that's all right first. So do you solemnly affirm that the evidence to be given by you in these proceedings shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please use the mic when you answer.
I do.
That worked. And then so we don't get feedback, we have to shut it off after we're done talking, if that's okay. Is there anyone else joining us by Zoom? Either one of our ladies up front? No?
No, we don't have anybody by Zoom.
Okay, Mr. Graham. We've all got the same planning report that you were circulated, but if you wish to provide any additional information to the committee, now would be a good time to do so.
I did go ahead and have the survey done in January, just so we could make sure where all the lot lines were and where they were going to end up. I know that Drummond North Elmsley has been out and marked it, and it was pretty well exactly where McIntosh and Perry said that it was for the road. I don't have a registered survey because I won't get that till after the lots are created. But I can leave this with the county if they want.
I think the county will get circulated in due course if the applications get approved, and our only concern was the information brought up by your neighbors in some information they submitted to us where they weren't sure on the property lines, but if you've had an OLS out there, then that's who I would tend to agree with. Doug, do you have a comment, question?
Maybe there are two surveyors involved in this. I think Mr. Hayter said that he was going to employ, or maybe it was Mr. Johnson. Somebody said that they were going to employ a surveyor as well. So I would hope that there's collaboration between the surveyors and everything is agreed upon when before that draft plan becomes a registered plan.
I would hope that as well, Doug, but we don't get into the middle of those disputes. That's outside our approval authority, thank God. For that, I wouldn't want to do it. Stephen, any comments?
No, no questions, no comments.
Okay, and there was another public concern raised about drainage. I'm not sure that that's an issue. I'm not sure that the concern was, and no one's here. Are you aware of that, Mr. Graham? Or?
Yes, there is it's a big drain that runs through the property, and I've been out on the property on all 3 lots with Sarah from Miss Rideau Valley Conservation, and there's not a problem with the drainage. It runs across the road and down right down to the Tay River.
Okay, and have you looked at the proposed draft conditions for the creation of the lots?
Yes, I have.
Any questions or concerns with any of those?
No. And when we did the draft on the survey, I provided the township with the extra road widening allowance because as of the past severances that I've taken off, the road widening is wanted. So I brought that right into the first lot.
Okay, Doug, anything further?
If Mr. Graham is happy with the conditions, so am I.
I'm fine.
Okay, well, I have a motion here that's moved by Stephen Lewis, second by Doug James, that applications B23-141, B23-142, and B23-143 be approved subject to the conditions presented in the planning report. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? So that's been approved at this level. You'll be getting written notice either by email or probably by email and also by regular mail. And you got 2 years to get everything completed. And as one of their conditions, that includes getting the road completed to the township satisfaction.
Yep. Thank you very much, committee and Lanark County.
Thanks for attending. Okay, Cindy, if you want to present the next one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next application is application B22/147, the Becker Milk Company. And this is for a new lot, together with a servicing easement in the town of Carlton Place on Town Line Road West. This application will create a 3,784.7 square meter vacant commercial lot which will have frontage and access on Town Line Road West. The retained lands will contain a 3,234.7 square meter commercial lot with an existing convenience store located at 163 Town Line Road West. It was determined during the review that the servicing for water and sewer comes off of Joseph Street, not Town Line. So the applicants amended their application to request a servicing easement over the rear of the retained lands, and that's been contemplated in the recirculated notices that were sent out. There was a phase 1 done on the property due to potential contamination from the retained lands. So that has also been addressed in the conditions with requesting a phase 2 before the lot is created. We also just when we looked at the site plan drawings. There's a shared commercial access that has been approved by the county because it's on a county road. So we did include the provision, if needed, that there could be shared easements for access, just because it looks like perhaps the two properties would share significant portion of the entranceway. We did receive some public concern relating to the contamination. Those comments were included, but we are recommending approval of the application subject to the conditions outlined in the planning report. I think the agent might speak to potentially amending one of the conditions, and we can address that as part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you. And who all do we have attending? We have Chris here. And I might as well swear you in. Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence to be given by you in these proceedings shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And is there anybody attending by Zoom?
Yes, I believe we have the applicant, Mr. Correa. How do you pronounce his last name? Correa?
And Chris,
My name is Balu Korea.
Mr. Correa, were you planning on making any presentation to the committee?
I'm just gonna watch you guys, and the agent, Chris.
Okay, so if you're not going to be making a presentation, we won't bother swearing you in for now. And
No, dear, no.
okay, so Chris, I'll let you go ahead first. As usual, we've all seen the report and read through it, so I'll let you go through any additional information, and then if you want to jump in right after that into any comments on the conditions, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think I have anything else to add to the application. I think we've been working with the county for quite a while now. We did go through an official plan amendment already with the town of Carleton Place for this property in order to get the proposed use permitted, but we still have to go through the DP3 application. So I don't really have anything more to add there, but as Cindy mentioned, I would like to discuss one of the conditions when and if that time comes.
Any questions on the application by either of the members? I have none. Doug?
I have none and no comments. Everything looks straightforward to me.
Stephen?
Not in the application, but the conditions, a couple questions.
Okay, Chris, maybe you want to go ahead on your comments on the conditions, and then I'll ask Stephen for his.
Thank you. The comment I have is concerning condition number 7, that the applicant apply for a class 3 development permit application in regard to development of the severed lot, and that said application is deemed complete by town staff. It is the intent of the applicant to submit a DP3 application for the property, but upon reviewing that, we were wondering if that condition could be removed from the list of required conditions, only because in effect that requires our client to have a completed application accepted by staff in order to meet the conditions of the severance. And, a DP3 application is not just, any exceptions, but also site plan related requirements. And if we also have to do a phase 2 environmental site assessment, no doubt the town's going to want a completed assessment done with a complete application. So upon thinking about it further, the risk we feel by tying that condition to the severance is it requires him to have a completed application in order to finish the severance. But if for some reason something happens, things don't progress as quickly as we anticipate, the severance might lapse if we're not able to get an application in within the 2 years. So that's why we were requesting to have that condition removed. So that way, the severance isn't tied to that other application. Thank you.
Thanks. Cindy, do you have any comments on that?
So I reached out to Tyler at the town this morning. So he actually just sent me, I was waiting for a response from him because he wanted to review with the development team. I still don't have a definitive answer. I think they're willing to work with you on that in terms of not requiring it. They're looking at finessing the conditions. So I'm wondering if we can give it another 5 or 10 minutes to see what they come back with. I think the concern is that they do want the phase 2 done regardless. But I think that it looks to me like they're relatively flexible with respect to the permit. One option that comes to mind is that if it turns out that you don't need the DP3 permit, then they can waive that and sign off on the condition in any way, or there could be a formal request to amend the conditions, as well as an option to come back and have that condition removed formally is another option. But if I should know a little bit more of the town's position in a few minutes.
Stephen, you had some questions on the conditions.
Well, yeah, number 7, but we'll wait for that. And also number 16. Close and convey the former road lying between the applicant severed and retained. I don't notice or know of a road through there. Is there an unopened road allowance or a road?
Most likely there's not. That's the kind of standard condition that the Public Works Department likes to put in because we don't really know for sure what the former road status was until the surveyors go out and if they determine that there is one. So the Public Works will, as soon as they have the draft survey that shows that there's no road widening, they'll clear those conditions.
Okay, and then back, exactly what is a class 3 permit, number 7?
I am not an expert in the development permit system, so I might ask Catherine to jump in on that one.
Unfortunately, I am also not overly familiar. However, in reviewing the Carleton Place development permit bylaw, a class 3 permit for a non-residential use is when a development generally does not meet the requirements, standards, and provisions of the development permit area. So I believe, and Chris may also be able to provide more information on this, is that the proposed use is not listed in the community commercial development permit area zone. So I might defer that to Chris if he has any further information on that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding of the development permit system is it sort of combines the site plan and any sort of minor variance process together. So rather than say if you needed a zoning amendment or a minor variance for something you were proposing, you'd get that approval and then you'd make your site plan in most cases. In the town of Carleton Place, they sort of do all that as one. So a completed class 3 development permit would require the full site plan details to be submitted, any landscaping that might be proposed, civil engineering, whereas just the regular zoning, you probably wouldn't need all that information in order to get your exceptions in place. So that's sort of the difference between the system. So it essentially means we need to have everything ready and submitted for that application.
Yeah, they're asking it to be deemed complete, not necessarily finalized or approved, but you'd have to have everything submitted. I appreciate that, Chris. Tracy?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, would you like to swear me?
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence to be given by you in these proceedings shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And you're probably familiar with this development permit process.
I am.
I don't know if you were one of the ones that helped create it in the first
No.
place or not, but
Can't take credit for that, but I just wanted to note the application before the committee is land division, lot creation, right? And so I'm always cautious with conditions like this DP3 that require an extensive amount of work by our client to get to a submission, tying that to the lot creation, because really what you have before you is not what's the future use of the property, so much as is it appropriate to create this parcel of land or not. So the condition, I think it's number 7, about requiring a development permit application is really about how the property will be used in the future. I mean, the engineering design, the building renderings, all of those things, which are respectfully not really the land division question that you have before you today. So I'm hoping you'll consider the need for that development permit condition. The land division should allow the lot to be created, and then the property owner in 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years could come back with a site plan application to the town for his future development when he's ready. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Doug,
I wonder if we can defer this until after number 3 on our agenda, so that maybe Cindy can hear back from the town or give the town a chance to reply to Chris's request to delete number 7.
Stephen, any further comments?
No, I can go with Doug's idea, or I'm happy to pass the application and throw number 7 out, because I'm not satisfied putting a condition on when I don't even really know what it is, or nobody knows what it is. How do we know the site plan's not going to change by the time the building comes? Do we already know what's going to be built there and everything's ready to go? If we do, then maybe it's okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have an idea of what is going there. It's going to be a kids' world, which is sort of an indoor gym playground area, sort of after school activities and things like that. And we have gone through the OPA, like I mentioned before, to get that approved at an official plan level. But again, going back to, what we've been saying, what Tracy had said, it's not a guarantee that it goes forward. Lots of different things can happen, and if he doesn't end up making that application for that specific use, then the severance is going to lapse. Whereas if we remove that condition, at least he can go through, finish the other conditions, and at least get a lot out of it. And then if he doesn't move forward with his anticipated use, at least he still has his severance, whereas he loses everything if we don't take that off. So that's really the reason for asking for it.
So the town will have safeguards to look after the situation when the building permit or the site plan's put in, right?
Yeah, that's the DP3 process. They'll have full review and full commenting, and there's going to be a public meeting associated with that, with neighbor comments and everything. It's all combined into one process.
The advantage of putting it through at the same time or as a condition of draft plan approval is that we won't have a lot that cannot be built on. Once they get through that process, it can be built on. I'm not familiar enough with the whole process to think that we can create this lot and something else could be built. I just don't know if that's the case or not. We heard back from the town yet?
I have not yet. I have sent an email to him to ask if he could join the meeting in a few minutes if we're okay with deferring while we talk about the other applications.
Is this a normal request of the municipality to put this on? Like, I don't remember running into this with other consent applications in the town of Carleton Place.
I think, again, I don't really have the experience to know historically, but I have seen that if there's a specific purpose for the lot that's put in the application to creating the lot, that they do tend to deal with that as part of the conditions. Now, I did just hear back from Tyler. Yeah. So if you just give me a minute, I'll just read the email and I'll all right, so Chris makes a good point. There's no value added to having any future owner rush into a site plan agreement. As such, the condition requiring a Class 3 development permit can be removed from the conditional approval of the consent. All the other original conditions will be requested by the town. Right. Okay. The Phase 2 ESA, which will require some coordination on Baloo's end, may take longer than the conditional approval period. I'm speculating worst case scenario. In that event, I advise that they monitor the process and stay in touch with the county in any event, and if an extension for the conditional approval is required. So I take it from that he is okay with removing the Class 3 development permit as long as the other conditions remain in.
Okay, well, I think I'm okay with that as well. Was this for the town was or not? Doug, you any comments or?
My only comment was going to be, before we heard from the town, there are so many conditions, other conditions in our conditions, or so many other requirements in our conditions that I would think the town could use those to their benefit to make sure that anything that was going to be required by this DP3 would be able to be covered in the other conditions. So, but having heard from the town that they're content with removing number 7, let's proceed.
Chris, anything further from your end? Are you happy if we remove that condition? Does that satisfy your concerns?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Okay, I have a motion that's been moved by Doug James, second by Stephen Lewis, that application B 22147 be approved subject to the conditions presenting in the planning report as amended. And the amendment would be to remove condition number 7 and then renumber appropriately. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much, Chris.
All right, so the next application, two applications, B 23105 and B 23106. And this is for David Husband for the creation of 2 new lots off of Drummond Concession 9A in Drummond North Elmsley. So these applications will create 0.061 hectare residential landholding with frontage and access on Drummond Concession 9A. And the retained lands will contain a 63.97 hectare landholding with existing dwellings and outbuildings that's located at 1053 Drummond Concession 9A. The report or the applications were supported by a hydrogeological report as well as an EIS. Both of those were peer reviewed and the hydroge report was signed off. Those recommendations will be set out in a development agreement. When I drafted up the planning report, I realized that we hadn't received sort of a response to the EIS peer review comments. So we have added that back in as a condition just to close off that loop, but there weren't any major concerns really that would impact the ability to create the lots. It would just be a matter of incorporating those conditions into the development agreement. So we are recommending approval of these applications subject to the conditions set out in the planning report.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. And Tracy, I see you're here representing the applicant. You've already been sworn in. So do you want to provide any additional information for the committee and then we'll get into the conditions?
Sure, thank you. Just briefly, you have our severance sketch. There were 3 previous severances taken from this landholding a few years ago that we helped the property owner with facing to West Shore Drive. Drummond North Elmsley's official plan does allow severances on multiple road frontages, so hence the eligibility for these lots. The 2 lots are shown on our sketch, and as Cindy has noted, the environmental impact study was completed. There are some minor comments to be addressed by the biologist, so we'll have that report response resubmitted. The hydrogeology study went through several rounds of peer review, and the county's peer reviewer has signed off on that. We completed the minimum distance separation calculations for nearby livestock facilities, and those setbacks are complied with. And so I believe we have 2 lots that are developable and meet all of the policies.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Stephen? No? Doug?
None from me.
I'm pretty familiar with that area, Tracy. That was my father's property where the boat launch is across the road. And I used to take hay off those fields when I was a kid for the old guy that lived there, Mr. Boyce. But anyway, just a little history. Can we go into the conditions? Have you got any comments or questions on those?
I don't have any concerns with the conditions as written.
Okay. When I read through the reports, I noticed that in the EIS, they're requesting a breeding bird survey prior to a building permit being issued. And I know that we've got, a condition in there that says a development agreement is going to include all the requirements of the EIS and the hydrogeological report, but I'm concerned that might be something that would fall through the cracks. Have you any comments on that?
I'm completely going from memory because I don't have the EIS in front of me, but it's not uncommon to have wording that says if they're going to build within a certain time period of the year, then they need to do the breeding bird survey. So I'm guessing that's how that report is written. That's not uncommon in EIS reports, and those requirements would get implemented through the development agreement, which gets registered on title. So that's the trigger for when somebody's ready to build, not just the hydrogeology recommendations, but the EIS recommendations.
Now, this one specifically says before building permit application is to be accepted by the municipality, the breeding survey is done. I'm more common with the requirement that it's done if you build at certain times a year, and that makes sense to me. I'm just wondering if it might not be reasonable to get that survey done in conjunction with the lot approval,
I
or
get,
as a condition of the lot approval, so to
Yeah.
speak. It's a spring survey, as I understand, and it doesn't take very long, and it's not real expensive. I just like to get it out of the road so it doesn't fall through the cracks.
yeah, I appreciate the comments. I guess my thought is if the lots don't get developed on for a year or several years, then that study may not be relevant anymore. Because that kind of analysis is going to have a shelf life. So that would be my only thought is if you put it in the development agreement, then it's triggered at the time of development, which could be in the future.
Well, I'm wondering, Cindy, if we could just add in number 7 that part of 7B would include, it's going to be the recommendations that are included in the environmental impact study as revised and submitted, including a breeding bird survey as required or something along those lines, just so it's stands out that people see it. It's kind of buried in the report, as I recall.
So you're suggesting not making it a condition of the lot approval, but just drawing attention to it in the development agreement condition? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting. Tracy makes a good point that it may be a while before the lots are built on, and the necessity of the survey may change through time, and what they're surveying may change. So if we just make sure that it's noted, I'm fine with that. I just didn't want somebody to make application for a building permit, get all the contractors lined up and get started, and then find out they can't start because they got to wait till next spring to look for birds. That would be pretty frustrating for any of the local contractors, I would believe. You would be okay with that, Tracy?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. And putting it there somebody may choose to build on these soon, and then they'll want to do that survey now. So I don't have any issue with kind of bringing that to the top in the condition, as long as it's not a requirement to do the study to clear the condition.
Doug?
I defer to the experts who've already given their opinion, and if they're fine with it, I'm fine with it too.
Stephen?
Whatever you want to do, boss.
Okay, well then I'll proceed with the motion if you gentlemen are ready for it. So this was moved by Stephen Lewis, second by Doug James, that application B 23-105 and B 23-106 be approved subject to the conditions presented in the planning report. I'm going to put as amended because we're just making that minor amendment to clause 7B. Any discussion? All in favor? So that's carried. Thanks,
you.
Tracy. So Cindy, we have one deferred application. As we'll move on to it.
Okay, yeah. So the last application is deferred from the last meeting that we had for B 23/146, and this is for the Averys to create a new lot. It was deferred at the last meeting due to some questions about the location of the county road and the township unopened road allowance and the frontage of the severed lot in terms of whether or not widenings or road closings and so on and so forth would be required. The surveyor and the Public Works Department has worked on a bit of a sketch, and Christy, I'll have you bring up that sketch. Probably that, okay. So I'm not sure how easily that is to see from the screen, but the area in green has been flagged and identified as frontage on the severed lot that road widening will be required for. So we have the road widening condition in there anyway, but we've confirmed that the road widening will be pursuant to roughly what's shown in green there. The location of the county road with respect to the road allowance is shown. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a brown line on the northern part there where the county road veers off the road allowance. That is the area that the county has identified. It uses as part of its road infrastructure. So that section of the township road allowance that the county would prefer to have that assumed by the county in the county's name under its jurisdiction. And the yellow portion down below is the unopened road allowance, and there's an area there between the applicant's retained lands and the road that is the township road allowance. Originally, when the first discussions were had between the township and the county, there was a suggestion that the best way to deal with that would be through a road closure and conveyance, so that the applicant would then own the lands, their existing lands, and then they would own the lands up to the road allowance. Upon further reflection, the township does not want to close that section of road allowance. It does want to keep that road allowance open for the potential future road purposes. So we were looking at options yesterday with respect to how to best deal with that. And the main concern with the township is they do want to ensure that there's 60 meters of frontage for the retained lands. You can see where part 1 was surveyed, which was the initial section of lot in, I think it's lot 4 over there, that gets added to the lands in lot 5, which is the retained lands, to deal with the location of the barn and the house. So the suggestion that we were sort of looking at was to realign the western boundary of lot 1 or part 1 to be a little bit further west to make up whatever frontage, the 60 meters of frontage required to the location over the yellow section that the county is willing to take. It does not, I spoke at great length with the Public Works Department, and it does not want to take more lands than it needs for its road network. So it is very reluctant and does not want to take the whole section of yellow. It's not required for county purposes. But and again, it's hard to show on that sketch. The driveway is not shown. We think it's a fair bit further east of where that house is, and maybe Mr. Avery can confirm once he comes up and gets sworn in. But the driveway, I think, is a little bit further east. That's over the wider section of the yellow. But what we're suggesting is that the boundary of part 1 be moved a little bit further west, since the surveyors have to go out anyway to survey the road allowance, and then the 60 meters can be obtained from the western end.
Okay. Mr. Avery, did you want to come up and join us? And anybody else that happens to be with you that wants to can as well. Okay, could I get you both to use the mics and perhaps give your full names for the purpose of the public record, and then I'll get you sworn in.
William Edmund Avery.
Amanda Avery.
Okay, do you both solemnly affirm that the evidence to be given by you in these proceedings shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Bill?
We do. I do.
I do.
All right, so I'll get you to turn your mic on and off as you talk, if you will. It just makes it better for anyone that may be listening in by Zoom, better for us in here, I think. This all came back to us again because of this road stuff, and it's pretty well as clear as mud to me now, Bill. It's got to be pretty frustrating from your end. You know, you're adjacent to a county road, and now all of a sudden when you go to do something like this, you find out all these little issues that's happened over the past. Do you understand what Cindy was saying as a potential resolution to the issue?
No. And I'm when I'm here, is Mrs. Earl, can she hear what we're saying?
Yes.
Good. Okay, because she will be of interest to whether this is closed or not.
Maybe Mrs. Earl, can you just confirm if you can unmute and just confirm that you can hear us? Can you hear us, Mrs. Earl? You are unmuted, but we can't hear you. Perhaps you could type in the chat. We'll just give her a minute to respond, but I'm assuming that if she's on and that she can hear if she doesn't respond in the chat. So I would suggest we carry on, and if we hear from her that she can't hear, then we can see if there's an alternative.
So, Bill, do you understand what Cindy was saying about moving the lot line? I think, and maybe we can just confirm which one again. Cindy?
Not really, Cindy. So I am concerned with the part in the yellow. Amanda is going to talk about the part in the green, where they're basically two different issues. So what were you saying you had thought would resolve this part in the yellow issue?
Well, what the thought was is because there's a certain part of part one that, well, most of the frontage on part one is in yellow. However, so it doesn't technically front on the county road. It's about 53 meters. I think there's some wiggle room there in terms of where the brown and the yellow kind of intersect in front of part one. But the suggestion was, because they don't want to take lands that it doesn't need further east, is if part one, the westerly boundary of part one gets like realigned, another part gets created just to sort of, and it can be in a triangular shape so that the road frontage further west meets the 60-meter requirement of Tay Valley. I did suggest alternatives such as a minor variance. However, they were not supportive of that. They would prefer to have the 60 meters directly on the front for the frontage of the retained lands. So all we would need to do is just move that boundary of part one a little bit further west.
Okay, you can't see this in the map, but there's another house there. Okay, so there's two houses come off this laneway. The house that the lot line goes right through, and there's a house to the east of where the barn is, just on the other side of where that imaginary dotted line is going down there. So there's two houses there. So we actually need 300 feet of road frontage in front of this, because there's actually two houses on the same property, but at some point, the other house may well want to be separated from the barn and that piece of property. Who knows what might happen down the road? And also, if you close that part in yellow, that means that Mrs. Earl, who is one of the people who could access off that unopened road allowance farther down, would not be able to use that road allowance, because closing that part in yellow effectively closes access to that unopened road allowance for the full length. And looking at it with the township CAO, she looked at a possible 10 owners wanting access to that unopened road allowance at some point, because that unopened road allowance runs into Bennett Lake eventually, and all the cottage roads cross that on private road at some point, but have no actual public road access anywhere to that. So I am still maintaining that the county should take the whole part in the yellow and not cause that road allowance to be closed and leave it there. And that's where I'm at with this.
Okay, go ahead.
Just to clarify, we're not requiring the road allowance to be closed and conveyed anymore. We acknowledge that based on what you and Miss and Amanda has said at the township, that we don't, we're fine with the road allowance not being closed and understand the need for future road purposes. That leaves that section of yellow road allowance. It's open until it's closed. So that means the public can traverse it, and it won't, what we're proposing here won't impact the public's ability to use that road allowance. your driveway crosses that road allowance. The township has indicated that the location of the driveway, whether it's there or that they do want a condition that the location of the driveway should be to the satisfaction of the township, whether it's there or whether it's moved elsewhere. That is one of the suggestions that Amanda Mabel at Tay Valley had requested, that a condition be included to note that the location of the driveway should be to the satisfaction of the township, which would also be subject to county approval, just because it would need to approve any entrances on the county road. But we're suggesting that we amend condition 9 to read as follows: that the owner applicant shall ensure the retained lands shall have sufficient frontage on the county road by adjusting the western boundary of part 1 to be 60 meters from where the county public works agrees it has jurisdiction for its road. The surveyor shall work with the public works manager to establish this point within the area noted in yellow. And as I mentioned before, I believe there's some wiggle room there. They don't want the full section of yellow, but they are willing to work with the applicant to sort of assume whatever makes sense of the most western part of the yellow.
I think I saw another, a more detailed sketch, or a sketch that included land to the south where there was, as Mr. Avery says, a barn located next to that boundary, that western boundary of part 1. Is there a
Oh,
possible?
the barn I think that Mr. Avery is referring to is that is sort of on the boundary of part 1, that there's the house there, and then just south of that that's the barn there. Is that correct, Mr. Avery?
That's
Now,
the barn? Okay.
We can, Catherine has superimposed the sketch on the drape imagery, and that might be helpful. I'm wondering, Catherine, if we can get you to maybe share your screen if you have that sketch. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I cannot screen share. It won't let me screen share, but I can.
I think Christy just enabled it, so can you try again? Oh, it's really.
Yeah. Can you
So-
see it?
We can, from our end, the drape imagery is really hard to sort of see. I don't know if, can you zoom? Are you able to zoom out and give more context without changing oh, that's a bit better. Part of the confusion that we had initially was the draft sketch showed the driveway to the west of the barn initially, and I think the existing driveway is a fair bit further east. Yeah. Sure. So I don't know, Doug, if that gives you a little bit more context with the drape imagery. The road allowance that they don't want, the township road allowance that they don't want to close is further, it heads up further northeast of where the cursor is there. And it does eventually intersect with the shore of Bennett Lake. So in that regard, not closing that road allowance does make sense. And the suggestion was that we just leave that road allowance in the townships. It'll remain as a unopened, unimproved road allowance.
Is there a problem with changing that, I'm gonna call it easterly line of part 1, Bill?
I think that would be the westerly, like, you mean to extend the westerly end of part 1?
Well, I don't know whether north is up or down on the sketch, so I'm not sure which way it is, Cindy, but certainly left. I'm gonna say on the left-hand side. How's that?
So you want to take that line there and move it to the left.
So that you get 60 meters of frontage there on a traveled road.
Yeah, better.
Is this free to do? Because we just surveyed all of this, so we have to do a resurvey to move this line 60 feet to the left, like we're not made of money. Sorry.
So I know like the county is cost sharing on the survey because it does want to have a part created for the brown section and then likely a part for the road as well. So that will entail some cost savings when there's some cost sharing involved because they're only going out once and they're doing additional work. Unfortunately, typically we don't suggest that people do the survey before you have approvals for this very reason, because oftentimes there's configuration changes that occur as a result of the planning review. In this case, our plan was done ahead of time. If we had waited, then we could have dealt with it just in one go. But the reality is our plan was done ahead. So realigning that, it would, I think, and I'm not a surveyor, so I'm not sure, but adding additional part probably wouldn't cost an awful lot of money when they're going out anyway to do more survey work. It's a matter of planting an extra bar and a paper exercise. So I don't think it would cost a huge additional cost.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, Bill, because if you didn't have the survey done, you wouldn't know all these problems existed, and it's a
That's
catch-22.
exactly-
I appreciate that.
That's exactly why the survey was done first, because because the GIS mapping is off about 500 feet for that front, and I always knew it was wrong because I could just step it out from the other side. So we had that done first to determine where the lot line between lot 4 and lot 5 was, and it turned out to be through my house and through the barn. So therefore we had to put part 1 onto lot 5, saving except of course that legal work is not done yet. Thank you very much, because that would be more of an expense. My question is, Cindy, instead of moving the part 1 lot line west, because honestly, that's a rock pile up there, and so the county's going to have a road allowance on a rock pile. Why doesn't the county just take another 20 feet of road widening, not the whole there, so extend the green part down a little farther if we're going to have to survey that, and just run from the green line down so that there's actually road frontage then on part 1 all the way up. Would that suffice rather than moving the left-hand boundary of part 1 over if we just made the county road slightly wider enough that the county road actually came in on that part 1, and so that we had road frontage all the way across part 1. We need actually, yes, you don't need to close that, but if the county could take that, and like you showed Cindy, the road entrance is just about where that dotted line comes in. So yes, we need road frontage from there over. I don't know whether that'll work or not, whether that will be simpler than moving that part 1 line, because that was a big deal to figure out where we wanted to put that part 1. And it doesn't go back there much farther. That part 1 is only a little bit there. I don't know. Well, I'm open to comment.
I think what Cindy was talking about, and the way I read these draft conditions, is the county was going to take the road over to the, I'm going to call it the right-hand boundary of part 1. Is that not correct? And we still would be short like 7 meters of frontage. Is that what's planned?
Sorry, can you repeat what you asked? I wasn't sure I understood.
Well, in order to give that part 1 60 meters of frontage, which we're saying it needs, part of the yellow would have to be transferred to the county as well, over to that lot line, which is, I think, what Bill was saying as well. I don't think the county wants to go 7 meters further on that side.
Yeah, that's right. The main concern is that they're not taking land that it doesn't need for operational purposes. And I think they're certainly willing to work with the applicant to take a little bit more than what's shown in the green in terms of facilitating the access. Whether or not they feel comfortable going all the way to the driveway is, I think, something that they'll look at once the surveyor goes on the ground. Either way, there's going to be parts needed. So whether it is realigning the western boundary of part one or creating the additional parts on the frontage, I think it's going to be the same sort of survey costs either way. But I think there's some flexibility there as long as there's some recognition that there'll be 60 meters that may require a readjustment of part one boundary if they can't get the 60 meters from the other side.
I don't know if that's clear or not to you, Bill. Is that you and Amanda? You understand what we're saying? We're trying to get 60 meters of frontage on a maintained municipal road, which
Yes,
by that Severn sketch now and based where the road allowances are, you don't have. You got virtually nothing. So you got to somehow or other come up with that. And it looks like the county would take some of that yellow to help us out, but they're not prepared to go further. I'm just going to say to the right instead of get caught up in the east and west.
okay, the only concern, Mr. Chair, would be for the road frontage at the house that isn't shown on this, my father's house, which is basically almost beside the barn down there. So we've got two houses now with only road frontage for one house. Is that, how does the county feel about that? And how does that go into planning decisions?
I'm not sure, maybe Catherine can confirm, but I'm not aware that Tay Valley zoning bylaw requires double frontage if there's two houses. I understand it's still 60 meters regardless, but do you happen to know? I'm just going to look at their planning report.
I'm fairly certain that's the case, Cindy. I know people who have built a secondary dwelling on their existing lot and they only had to have 60 meters of frontage. So I think it's legal to have it. You wouldn't be able to do a severance in the future for that separate house without dealing with this whole road issue all over again.
Which is fine at the time being, yes, because my daughter lives in the other house, so, and she is going to continue to live there, even though her actual property is on the other side. Yeah, I guess this is a satisfactory solution. It's not necessarily the one that I would prefer, but I guess it's right. Just, it would be much simpler if the county took the whole thing, but seeing as they really don't want the whole thing, if the township wants to keep that as an unopened road allowance, I guess it's an unopened road allowance.
Catherine, if you don't mind, closing out, I want to pull up have Christy pull up the slide for I just want to go through, make sure everybody's comfortable with the proposed amended wording from what was in the planning report. So I read it out earlier, but I just want to make sure that it makes sense with the discussion that we've had. So it's slide 18. So in recognition of keeping the alternative approach. Yeah. So if we go with the theory that whatever portion of the yellow remains as an unopened township road allowance, what we would do is amend condition 9 that was proposed in the planning report to what's up on the screen, that the applicant ensure the retained lands have sufficient frontage on the county road by adjusting the western boundary of part 1 to be 60 meters from where the county public works agrees that is jurisdiction for the road, understanding that there's potentially some wiggle room there in terms of how far into the yellow the county might agree to take over. The surveyor shall work with public works manager to establish the point within the area noted in yellow. And then the township's new condition to confirm that the location of the driveway shall be to the satisfaction of the township, subject to county approval if relocated.
I'd like to keep as much flexibility for the owner as we can when we do this. Do we need to actually say which lot line would be moved, which side? I mean, if the county would agree to go 7 meters in the other direction, I think that would be a better solution for the owner, but I'll leave it at that.
I think that's fine too.
Yeah, I can't speak for them. I'm not saying they will agree to it, but it gets closer to the driveway and still probably doesn't hinder the other people. So I think there's a number of solutions that just need to be worked out. And I think there's lots of time to do it if we give provisional consent. I just want to make sure that wording doesn't tie the applicant's hands to some one specific solution, if you understand what I'm trying to say, Cindy.
So if we amended it to say they ensure the retained lands have sufficient frontage on the county road through this, in consultation with the county public works, that takes out that western boundary line.
I think it's the county public works and probably the township as well, right? It's both parties, because you're going to be dealing with township road allowance and.
I'm fine with that if that's okay.
Yes, I think that's a satisfactory improvement to that statement. Yes.
I'm just trying to create as much flexibility as I can for you guys to try and find a solution. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to be any hindrance at all. We just want to get it done for you.
Thank you.
Any other conditions or concerns from anybody? Bill or Amanda? No?
I'm just talking about the green portion.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just a little confused about the road widening. Only basically there was an appendix D signed by Terry McCain on January 15th. It said there's no road widening required. But now we have to survey and get road widening. So I'm just confused as to why now we have to do that.
So initially, you're right. Initially, they did think that no road widening was required. That was based on their best assessment when they went out on site. I think in further review, they did realize they assumed that the road was located on the road allowance, and I think that assumption was kind of flushed out a little bit when we were doing the further review. Typically, when we approve new lots, the lot needs to be surveyed, and then that would definitely show the frontage in relation to where the road is and whether or not the road has enough width, whether it's located in the road allowance or whether it is forced down onto the applicant's property. And again, in this case, because you weren't surveying the whole frontage, that wasn't known at the time. But when they did the further site visits and review, trying to figure out the location, they did determine that that was a requirement, or that it did make sense to take a road widening because the portion of the road is forced down a little bit onto the on the concession lot. It is outside of the road allowance.
Okay, so Appendix D is just a null thing. It's void then, right?
It has been updated, yeah.
My other thing is, and this isn't with current county, it's just the road was built, and how come like the cost of doing all this is put on the applicant when the road was built? How come roads and stuff weren't surveyed and those boundaries and things were established? Like, should it not be? I understand that, yes, I as the applicant have to pay for things. I'm not saying things should be free, but should there not be kind of a cost sharing in this because the county messed up back in the day and didn't do the surveying and their due diligence?
So I think there are so many roads that don't follow road allowances everywhere in Eastern Ontario because of the topography. Back when those roads were established, they were put through in the easiest point possible. They tried to follow the road allowances, but quite often they veered off. They didn't have the ability to do surveys when those roads were initially created. This is an opportunity as we determine these issues when they come up with planning applications and so on and so forth. It's the opportunity to sort of fix the record and fix the titles to these situations. The Planning Act is set up, and most municipalities have official plan policies in place that do allow the municipality when planning applications come forward that they can impose the conditions to require road widenings or recognizing forced roads through people's properties. So that is a tool that the municipalities have under the Planning Act to require that as a condition of consent at the applicant's cost.
So we typically wouldn't make it a condition that the county has to pay towards your survey, but we would encourage you to talk to the county about obtaining some funds from them to cover the cost of correcting the situation that's on the remnant parcel. And in the past, they have contributed some money towards that, where they've split the cost of the survey or whatever, and I would just, you deal with them, but we don't want to make that a condition, because if they say no, then that condition can't be fulfilled, and we're back here doing this all over again in 2 years. So, but I would suggest you go and ask them as part of the discussions and negotiations about the whole thing, then I would be suggest that you ask them to contribute something towards any additional survey work you have to do, or maybe something towards what you've already done.
And I
Thank you.
Sorry, I can confirm that they are, because they do want extra parts created to help them establish the road where it curves off, which has nothing to do with this planning application, that they are willing to contribute costs. And again, usually when two parties go together on the survey costs, it does make it cheaper for both. So that should result in some cost savings as well.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anything from the members?
The only comment that I have, if Bill Avery is content with that solution, as far as the portion in yellow is concerned, I'm content with that solution as well.
Okay, well, I have a motion that's moved by Doug James and second by Stephen Lewis, that application B 123 be approved subject to the conditions presented in the planning report. And I'm going to put as amended, because we're actually going to amend that one condition as to how it's worded on frontage. And I think I'm satisfied that Cindy's got our intent of that amendment. Are you satisfied, Bill, on that?
And just to clarify, the addition of the township, a new condition for the township, that the location of the driveway shall be to the satisfaction of the township, subject to county approval if relocated.
Yes, I'm fine with that as well. Any discussion? All in favor? So that's approved. Good luck. You got a couple of years to get through all this stuff.
Thank you.
Any other business on our agenda, Cindy?
No, there's not.
Okay, so I'd like to make a reminder, the next meeting is June 18th, so it's not the second Tuesday, but the third Tuesday in the month. Hopefully you'll have all your crops planted by then, Mr. Lewis. So if there's nothing further, I have a motion moved by Stephen Lewis, second by Doug James, that the meeting does now be adjourned at 11:07.